The hymn, Ride On in Majesty, was written by Henry Hart Milman in 1827. The words of the hymn cleverly focus our attention on the mix of emotions we experience on Palm Sunday: humility and splendour, suffering and triumph, sorrow and joy intermingle in this hymn as we rejoice in Jesus' entry into Jerusalem and mourn what will happen less than a week later on Good Friday. The hymn Glory Be to Jesus was translated by Edward Caswall in the 19th century from an Italian text thought to have been written in the 18th century. Drawing on lots of imagery about sacrifice, both from the Old Testament and from the book of Hebrews in the New Testament, it is a remarkable and poetic reflection on Jesus' blood and the redemption it brought. is one of the most bitter-sweet moments in the Church's calendar. On Palm Sunday, we commemorate Jesus' entry into Jerusalem, when all the crowds accompanying him sang a psalm of praise, waved branches, and appeared to welcome Jesus into Jerusalem as king. After years of not recognising who Jesus was, of misunderstanding and conflict, it feels as though the crowd suddenly get it. They see Jesus riding on a donkey, and maybe remember prophecies like those in Zechariah 9:9, which says, "Lo, your king comes to you, triumphant and victorious is he, humble and riding on a donkey." Or maybe they remember that Solomon rode to his coronation on a donkey. Whatever it was, the crowd finally seemed to understand who Jesus was and what he had come to do. And they celebrated. Of course, we know, as Jesus did himself, that this is not the happy ending we might hope for. Almost the moment that Jesus set foot in Jerusalem, the crowd turned and melted away. Only a week later, they were baying for his death. One of the things that strikes me every year on Palm Sunday is how Jesus acts through all of this. We know that he knew that his death was imminent because he told the disciples about it on more than one occasion. He must have seen the crowd celebration and known how quickly they would change. A strong sense of foreboding hangs over this whole event, a sense that the worst is still to come. And yet, through it all, Jesus persevered. Quietly, authentically, generously, he went about his business as he always did, teaching the disciples, responding with love to people like the woman who anointed him with oil, holding his own against those who sought to trip him up with difficult questions. By doing so, he suggests to us how we might seek to live in hard times. The answer? One step at a time, not letting the anxieties and stresses that lie all around us knock us off course, being who we are called to be, quietly, authentically, and generously. It may help to remember that even Jesus became overwhelmed with grief in the Garden of Gethsemane just before his arrest. We are not called to be unfeeling automatons, but we see in Jesus through all of this, especially during his trial, when the accusations flying around became more and more desperate. In Jesus, we see a still centre, someone who listened more than he spoke, someone who never stopped being truly who he was. This is the Jesus of Palm Sunday. This is the Jesus of Holy Week. This Jesus stands with us through all of this, knowing our pain, giving us comfort, and loving us through it all. Jesu, lover of my soul, was one of the great Charles Wesley's hymns, written in 1740. Originally, it was called In Temptation by Wesley, and therefore was talking about how Jesus could save us from the temptations we find all around us. Most people who sing it today, however, think of it more widely than that, as referring to the comfort, refuge and love that we find in Jesus in every part of our lives.
Hide me, O my Saviour. sick and weak the blind, just and holy is thy name. I am all unrighteousness, false and full of sin I am. Thou art full of truth and grace. Plenteous grace with thee